John, let's start with Nvidia. Washington's export controls have no doubt challenged the broader semiconductor sector and has resulted in fewer sales to China. CEO of Nvidia, Jensen Huang, recently saying, quote, "Our business in China has substantially lower than the levels of the past, and it's a lot more competitive in China now because of the limitations on our technology." The company, though, seems to be trying to change that. And according to Reuters, working on a new AI chip that complies with the current export controls. The question for Wall Street is whether this will help improve its growth prospects in the country. Cowen analysts estimate Nvidia will make less than 5% of its 2025 sales in China. Before restrictions, sales were anticipated to be around 20 to 25%. We're looking at Nvidia stock today, bouncing back at $124 a share, up about 5%. Piper Sandler this morning raising its price target on the stock to $140. Analysts there expecting a strong earnings report when the company reports in late August. This as Wall Street awaits earnings from NXP Semiconductor. That stock also higher today. It feeds into the automotive market, and investors will look for a read through the electrical vehicle sector and whether demand is starting to improve in the back half of this year. Kelly.
Indeed. Seema, thank you very much.
Year to date, Nvidia stock is up by more than 140%, but the stock saw a massive sell-off over the past few weeks. That sent it to around $117 per share. However, it looks like Nvidia has one more trick up its sleeve, which will definitely send its stock soaring. According to an exclusive Reuters report, Nvidia is working on a new version of its flagship Blackwell GPUs for the Chinese market, which would be compatible with current US export controls. So, what does this mean? And what impact will it have on Nvidia stock? Let's find out in today's video. But before we do that, if you want to keep up with Nvidia's latest updates and keep up with the stock market's latest news, you can follow our Twitter account. We post multiple times daily about the biggest changes and catalysts in the market, so click the follow button if you don't want to miss the newest market updates. Now, back to today's video.
So for a look at top moving stocks in today's market, Jenny Horn's with us, markets correspondent here on Schwab Network, taking a look at Nvidia, of course, always in the headlines. And today, no different. It's working on a new chip to meet some China export restrictions. Let's hear a little bit about Nvidia this morning. Jenny, good morning.
Good morning, Nicole. I have to say that after a blistering week for Nvidia and the rest of the tech and chip trade last week, it's nice to see some upside today as we are up about 3.7% on the session here in real time. But following what was objectively good news for Nvidia, because of course this massive geopolitical export overhang I think has been a pretty major concern. I think actually for quite some time over the course of this year, it almost felt like we were very quick to forget that. The muscle memory of the trade of Nvidia feels very short-lived because this has been, I think, a pretty major headwind that we've sort of been able to brush off until the last several weeks. But news today that they're working on a new version of their flagship AI chip for the China market that would be compatible with these current U.S. export controls. Now, according to two of these sources first reported by Reuters, Nvidia will work with Inspur on the launch and distribution of that B20 chip, with shipments slated to start in the second quarter of 2025. We did also see lots of analysts that had nothing but positive things to say about Nvidia today, as Citi did open a 30-day positive catalyst watch on shares ahead of this major conference where we could hear from, of course, their CEO as well as Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, that this analyst believes they'll be likely discussing the future of AI and the various ways that Nvidia could be really seeing their ARM-based Gray CPU for servers and what that really looks like. So more context on that this analyst is looking for, and they also did say that the CEO discussions should actually shed positive light on how Nvidia's end customers make their money or their return on equity profile, which is top of mind for many investors at this current time. So I know that we always panic when we see Nvidia turn over as we have, because it does feel very much like it brings down the overall market. But when you still look at the last several years, it still feels like a blip. And I know we've pulled back substantially from highs, but if you look at the long-term picture, this is still one of the best performing stocks this year, and by a huge margin.
In March, Nvidia unveiled its new Blackwell series, which is set to be mass-produced later in the year. These new chips combine 2 squares of silicon, the size of the company's previous offerings in the Hopper series. Also, within the series, the B200 is 30 times speedier than its predecessor at some tasks like serving up answers from chatbots. And according to Reuters, Nvidia will work with Inspur, one of its major distributor partners in China, on the launch and distribution of the chip, which is tentatively named the B20. Notably, Reuters cited 2 sources familiar with the matter who refused to be identified as Nvidia, is yet to make an announcement about this. Additionally, a spokesperson from the company refused to comment when asked about it. As you might already know, the U.S. tightened its controls on exports of cutting-edge semiconductor technologies to China in 2023, seeking to prevent breakthroughs in supercomputing that would aid China's military. Since then, Nvidia has developed 3 chips tailored specifically for the Chinese market. But why is the company doing this? And is China really this important for Nvidia? Let's get right into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Investocracy.
I mean, I think that the City call, with the 30-day positive catalyst watch, it almost feels like an options trade at this point, but it's at 122. It went up to 140. People were so excited at 130 and 140 only to see it sink down below 120 again. So it certainly has been volatile. Very interesting to see this call, this new price target, right? 150. These tech stocks, the question is, are they in or out? And that's sort of, and the head of Market Watch today, they even noted some stocks that I think the lead was Nvidia, Supermicro, and Broadcom, and 22 other stocks most likely to crash. No one really knows where we're going. Jenny, final thoughts?
And I think that's what's so, alarming ahead of these tech earnings. And obviously, we could see fantastic results and the market could rally. I think that's obviously the bullish case at this point. But on the other hand, you have the Mag 7 that are dominating what's expected, the overall growth for the S&P's earnings and revenue. Without the Mag 7, their growth rate for earnings, at least projected this quarter in the S&P, is cut in half. So that just speaks to the magnitude in which these companies have dominated the market. Nvidia, one day last week, shed $180 billion in market cap alone. So I always think that's concerning when so much is riding on one name, but obviously, at least to start this week, things are looking positive, green, because naturally Nvidia is green.
Thanks to the U.S. tightening its controls on chip exports to China, Chinese technology companies like Huawei and the Tencent-backed Inflame started investing a lot of money and efforts into building advanced AI chips domestically, which helped them take market share from companies like Nvidia and AMD. So, a new Blackwell version made specifically for China will help Nvidia fight back against these local Chinese companies, and it will also significantly boost Nvidia's revenues, profits, and stock price. This is because around 2 years ago, China accounted for 26% of Nvidia's total revenue, which showcases how important the Chinese market is for Nvidia. Today, that percentage fell to around 9%, and Nvidia's management team knows that they have to do something very quickly to counter this drop. Notably, Nvidia's most advanced chip for China, the H20, initially got off to a weak start when deliveries began this year, and the company priced it below a rival chip from Huawei. But, according to the 2 Reuters sources, sales are now growing rapidly. In fact, Nvidia is on track to sell over 1 million of its H20 chips in China this year, worth upwards of $12 billion, according to an estimate from research group SemiAnalysis. Even though there's some uncertainties regarding U.S. policies because of the elections, investors should expect the U.S. to continue pressuring the semiconductor industry regarding its exports. In fact, Reuters sources said that the U.S. wants the Netherlands and Japan to further restrict chip-making equipment to China. Not only that, but the Biden administration also has preliminary plans to place guardrails around the most advanced AI models, the core software of AI systems like ChatGPT. With all of this in mind, Nvidia is taking a step into the right direction to protect its market share in China, and this new version of the Blackwell chips could bring the company billions in revenue. To put that into perspective, we've seen that Nvidia's Chinese version of the Hopper AI chip, the H20, is expected to bring the company $12 billion this year, so imagine how much money Nvidia will earn from a much more advanced Blackwell chip. Now that you have an idea of what's going down, let's talk about whether now is the perfect time to load up on Nvidia shares or not. But first, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
The other part of it is all this started up as we got to the finish of the second quarter, and a little past, let's say the first 2 weeks of July, we're at a high. Sentiment and positioning is looking like it's getting a little bit out on a limb. So, Cameron, do you think that this sort of rotation, this little bumpy rotation, has taken care of some of that?
I don't think quite yet. It's been so slight, and you didn't even test the 50-day moving average for the S&P 500. If you look at those sentiment and positioning measures, they are stretched. They're not quite as extreme as they were in times like early 2018 or late 2021. So that would suggest that maybe there is more juice to pull people off the sidelines and get them into the market. And so what we put those risks into the camp of being not Tom Clancy risk, where they're not a clear and present danger, but we can't ignore them, because eventually, if you see earnings revisions start to move lower, they'll run into the fact that the market is expensive, positioning is stretched, and eventually that could cause some volatility.
Nvidia stock soared more than 500% over the past 3 years, leaving some analysts wondering about whether it would be ripe for a slowdown in 2024. However, many investors were still excited about this stock, and it surged nearly 150% in the first half of the year. This is thanks to the fact that the company reported triple-digit gains in Q1 earnings and is now preparing to launch its Blackwell architecture later this year. And now, as the second half of the year starts to unfold, investors are wondering if the stock performance slowdown some anticipated will happen, or if this top stock will continue to roar higher and even reach $200. In order to determine where Nvidia stock is headed next, we have to take a look at why it skyrocketed in the first place. Firstly, Nvidia's success is due to the amazing performance of its cutting-edge GPUs, which are used to power complex AI tasks. They are recognized as the fastest around, and on top of this, the company has developed an entire ecosystem of products and services, meaning customers can rely on Nvidia for all of their AI needs. As a result, Nvidia's revenue soared to record highs quarter after quarter, driven by strong AI demand, and that's why investors have piled into the stock. Now, let's consider the company's current stock price, which is around $117 as of the time of this video. Wall Street's average estimate calls for a nearly 20% gain within the coming 12 months. But at least one of the most bullish analysts predicts the stock will advance 65% to $200 within that time period. Hans Mosesmann, a Rosenblatt analyst, recently raised his price target to that level from $140. That would bring Nvidia to almost a $5 trillion valuation from $2.9 trillion right now. Though this may seem like a big potential jump, especially if we look at market value, it's important to remember that Nvidia continues to grow in the triple digits. The company forecasts revenue of about $28 billion in the second quarter, which would represent an increase of more than 100% from the year earlier period. And Nvidia has a huge catalyst ahead, the release of its Blackwell architecture and chip. Demand already has exceeded supply, and Nvidia expects this trend to continue into next year. All of this means it's very possible Nvidia could reach $200 a year from now. What about in the second half of this year, though? Nvidia is likely to gain, maybe even in the double digits, buoyed by optimism about the Blackwell release and ongoing growth. What does all of this mean for you as an investor? It actually doesn't matter whether Nvidia reaches $200 this year, next year, or a bit later. What's most important is Nvidia's ability to maintain its AI leadership and generate earnings growth over time. If the company can do this, there's reason to be optimistic about long-term stock performance. And, right now, considering Nvidia's solid AI platform and plans for annual innovation, there's reason to be optimistic about this top AI stock over the long run. But what do you think about Nvidia stock? Is it a buy at the current price? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to tell us what your valuation for Nvidia is. If you would like to know what companies like Nvidia have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.